Today, we're going to talk about something that scares many of us: death. For most people, the thought of dying brings fear and worry, and they wonder what will happen after. Will I feel fear, or will I find peace? But what if we could think about death differently? What if we saw it not as an end, but as part of life's journey? In today's story, we'll explore timeless wisdom that can transform the way we think about death, helping us see that death isn't something to fear, but part of a greater journey. So, hello and welcome to another episode of Way to Enlightenment. By the end of this video, you may find yourself free from the fear of death, understanding it with a sense of peace and acceptance. So, let's begin the story. One day, an elderly man lay on his deathbed, frail and weary, his heart heavy with fear and uncertainty. Though he had lived a full life, the thought of dying filled him with dread. He was terrified of what would happen after he passed away. He didn't want to leave his family, his home, or everything he had known in this life. Seeing his fear, the man's family called a wise monk to comfort him. This monk was known for his deep understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. When the monk arrived, he saw the man lying there filled with worry. The monk looked at him with compassion and kindness, placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder and asked, "Why are you so afraid?" The man looked at the monk and said, "I don't want to leave this world, my family, my life. I'm terrified of what comes after. I don't want to die." The monk smiled kindly and said, "I understand. So let me share a story with you. Perhaps it will ease your mind and lighten your heart." The monk began his story. Once there was a powerful king who loved adventure. One day, while hunting deep in a vast forest, he chased his prey so far that he lost his way. As night began to fall, he realized he was alone, surrounded by darkness, with no path back home. The forest was filled with strange sounds, and he could sense wild animals moving in the shadows. Fear began to creep into his heart. In the distance, he saw a dim light and followed it, hoping it would lead him to safety. He soon came upon a small broken-down hut. It was an old, shabby shelter, hardly fit for anyone to live in. The king knocked on the door, and an old hunter who lived in the hut opened it. Inside, the hut was filthy and filled with a terrible odor. In one corner, the hunter had made a spot to relieve himself, and rotting meat lay scattered around. Flies buzzed everywhere, and the smell was almost unbearable. The king wanted to leave, but he knew he couldn't survive the night alone in the forest. So, he asked the hunter if he could stay for the night. The hunter looked at him and said, "I've let travelers stay here before, but they always wanted to stay longer than one night. They forgot that this place is dirty and uncomfortable. I don't want that trouble again. You may stay only if you promise to leave at sunrise." The king thought, "Why would I want to stay in this terrible place? I just need to survive the night." So he agreed, promising to leave as soon as morning arrived. The hunter let him in, and the king sat down, trying not to breathe in the awful smell. As the night went on, the king slowly became accustomed to the filth. The smell didn't bother him as much, and even the buzzing flies became less annoying. Strangely, the longer he stayed, the more comfortable he felt, and he began to think the hut wasn't so bad after all. When the first light of dawn came, the hunter reminded him of his promise to leave, but by then, the king had grown attached to the place and wanted to stay a little longer. He made excuses, asking for just a few more hours. The hunter, annoyed, had to insist that the king keep his promise and leave the hut. The monk paused and looked at the man. "What do you think about the king in this story?" he asked. The man replied, "The king was foolish to become attached to such a filthy place." The monk nodded and said, "Exactly. The king in this story represents each of us, and the hut represents our body. If you look carefully, you'll see that this body is also filled with impurities. But we get so used to it that we become attached, even if life is filled with struggles, suffering, and pain. We forget that our bodies are only temporary shelters. The monk continued, "This body is like borrowed clothes. You wear it for a time, but it does not belong to you. Just as you must return clothes you've borrowed, one day, you must let go of this body too. Birth and death are like two sides of a single coin, inseparable and ever revolving. Death is not something to fear, but to accept peacefully. It's simply a transition, like moving from one room to another. Fear comes because we cling to these material things. We hold on to our bodies, our lives, and everything we have, forgetting that nothing here is permanent. The truth is, you are not limited to this body or this life. Your essence, your true self, is much greater than these things. When we let go of this body, we don't vanish. We simply move to the next part of our journey. Don't cling to this temporary shelter. When the time comes, accept it as a traveler would, knowing it's just one stop on a long journey." He continued, "Your spirit, your consciousness, is not destroyed but moves onward, evolving and continuing its journey. Death is not an end. It's merely a transformation, just as day turns to night and night to day. Life transforms into death, and death into new life." The man's face softened as he listened. He began to understand that death wasn't something to dread. His attachment to his body, to his life, had created his fear, but he now saw that he was much more than his physical self. He closed his eyes, feeling peace for the first time in a long while. Free from the fear that had once gripped him, he realized he had spent his life clinging to things he couldn't take with him. So, my friends, do not fear death. Embrace it as a traveler accepts a new destination. Just as the king grew attached to a poor hut in the story, you may feel attached to this body. But remember, clinging creates suffering, but understanding life and death as natural transitions frees us from fear. Death is merely a transformation. You are simply moving from one experience to another. So, let us release our attachment to the body, knowing that we are destined for something greater beyond. If this story touched your heart or gave you courage, please like this video, share it with those who may find comfort in it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that guide you to live with clarity, compassion, and courage. Remember, life is precious, but we are travelers on this path. Live fully, let go of fear, and trust in the journey ahead. I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.